This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?
And by the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. As a nonprofit, we rely on support from listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider a donation. To learn more and make a gift, visit us at www.gosuperior.org.
Welcome to the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt, Lindala.
And I'm Frida, Waara. We are made stronger by story, and there's no better source than the continent's largest body of fresh water, Lake Superior.
So join us as we highlight the 5 national parks that ring this greatest of the Great Lakes, meet the people, tour the places, and learn about the projects that make these parks and body of water so remarkable.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida, Waara.
Welcome once again to the Lake Superior Podcast. Today, Frida, we want to take a little bit of a moment and talk about some of the origins of why you and I are here. We do this for the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, and we've been doing this now for a couple of years. But Frida, you know, the interesting thing is we've not really ever touched on what the foundation is and what it does. And well, you have a much more long-term relationship with this group. I kind of came in when you came to me and said, let's do this podcast. And well, here we are a couple of years later. I'm really interested to learn more today. Tell me about what we're going to be talking about here.
You know, it's really interesting to know that the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation is basically the umbrella fundraising group for 5 national parks that dot the lake. And they are here in Michigan, starting on the far eastern side with Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, and then Keweenaw Historical, which is in the Upper Peninsula of the Upper Peninsula.
Yep.
And of course, Michigan also has ownership of Isle Royal, which is its national park all on its own, not a national lakeshore or national historical site. Then we go to Wisconsin, and it's the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore as well, where you're going to find so many of the country's most amazing lighthouses. The landscape there is just all dotted with 21 islands that make up that park. And then further around to the north shore of Minnesota, we have Grand Portage National Monument. And that park, I love to always talk about that because it is a national park that is entirely on an Indian reservation.
And the other thing that is interesting about this is we hear about national parks and I think we all kind of operate with this understanding or this perhaps misconception that says that these parks are going to be funded by the federal government because they're national parks. This is not always the case. And this is kind of, as I understand it, where the foundation come from to help out, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I am so proud that it's a woman right here in our own Marquette County who was at the very beginnings of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. And that's also a fellow real estate agent in Marquette County, Carol Brady. I've known Carol for a couple of decades there. Yep, we're both women that are well past our senior citizen AARP cards, but her knowledge of these parks and this landscape, this geography, is top shelf.
So we welcome Carol Brady to the podcast here today. Carol, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you. And hello, Frida, and nice to be chatting with you both.
It is very interesting to me because, as I kind of alluded to, I know a little bit about the foundation and what it does, but I've really mostly gotten to know people through this podcast and the various national parks around Lake Superior. Can you give us a little bit of a general overview or a little bit of history of how this National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation kind of came to be, about how long has it been around, that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, this in 2026, this will be 20 years since we became an actual official 501c3 nonprofit foundation. We had a couple of years before that of little meetings here and there, tossing ideas around. But it's in general, it's a like a friends organization, Friends to the Park. That is. National Park Service, has unbelievably over 400 units in the country, national park sites. And, there's only so much budget to go around.
Right.
So many of the parks, especially the bigger, well-known parks or parks that are near a large population, have friends organizations that work with the parks to raise funds for projects and programs. Well, the couple of the superintendents it was Pictured Rocks and Isle Royal, had been looking to maybe have a friends group organized, and it became apparent that, we're so remote up here, but Lake Superior, that's kind of like the one thing we all have in common. And there's 5, that Frida had already mentioned here, the 5 National Park Service parks, if you will, all included on the U.S. side. And what about having a group of parks have a friends group for the whole 5 of them? They ran the idea past the other superintendents, and then they all started reaching out to folks that they knew from the UP, or Lower Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, people that they knew had a real draw for some reason to either just Lake Superior itself or one or more of these parks, and folks that just really love the whole idea of a national park system and how they belong to everyone. They're so special. So anyway, I got sucked right into that little program.
Amen.
As someone that just thinks, Lake Superior is so well named, it is superior to not only all the other Great Lakes, but every lake in the whole world. So I'm all in on Lake Superior and then these national parks. And some of them I'd never been to prior, but knew of, Hassel Islands, for one. And I had never heard of Grand Portage, but oh my gosh, they're all amazing, amazing places. So we started having some meetings. I think we could do this. There was 8 or 9 of us, and we formed a working board and put it all together, worked with our superintendents, and we were off to the races, as they say.
And here you are now.
Back
I guess
in 2006.
Yeah,
here we are.
And
yep.
It's evolved really amazingly. But I mean, it's one thing to have an idea, and I've been in organizations that have gone into the incorporation process, the bylaws. I've done that kind of work. It had to be some sort of a credit to the seriousness or the interest that everybody of these 8 or 9 that you mentioned to actually take it to the next level. What was that like to make that evolution into something much more formalized?
Luckily, we had one of our founders you probably remember her, Rita Hodgins.
Oh, yes.
And, she's since passed, but she was with the Michigan Tourist Council, so she had lots of connections that way. We had 2 lawyers, so they knew all about putting out all the documents that we would need. We had the Paul and Cindy Marshall Hayden, the owners at the time of Lake Superior Magazine, well known all around the lake. And then a few business owners and me, lover of the lake.
And so that means you had a good team, and you take it to the next. A lot of expertise there, and that's good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, all willing to put the work in, because we were truly just a group of 8 or 9 people. Yeah.
Well, that makes it a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but having that kind of expertise is pretty good. But you mentioned a moment ago, you said something along the lines of a lot of these national parks had friends organizations, like similar what is here now. Why do the national parks need these kinds of organizations? What is it that these kinds of friends groups and other foundations and such have formed, not just here, but around the country?
Good question. Well, I think it all comes back to the sheer numbers of units, with over 400 national park sites, all being under the charge of the National Park Service, and the government budget for the National Park Service is, a finite number, and that number goes up and goes down, and generally it just keeps going up, but prices go up. So in order to keep all of these places as special as folks expect them to be when you go there, then they need help. They need outside help. And so the friends groups are there to help.
Well, and superintendents put a budget together every year for each park that they are governing, and they have lots of things that they need in that budget, and a lot of it is, the labor that they're paying their employees. But I know from the beginning, Carol, some of our projects were just, we needed to repair some boardwalk at Isle Royal. We needed to get bear lockers at Apostle Islands. We needed to do so many projects that really were just making it more visitor friendly for folks. And there just wasn't any money for that. So in the beginning, there were lots of I remember the Junior Ranger coloring books and some of those kinds of things. We try to look at what each little park, and we didn't have a lot of money in the beginning to say that let's get started. And then here came Phyllis. I think one of the biggest projects, and you know the history on this, here came Phyllis Green, who was superintendent at Isle Royal, with a ballast water project. That had to be huge, because that was about that affected all the parks, and it was also about Lake Superior. And of course, the health of all the other lakes, because Lake Superior is dumping into them all. So, it's an important piece. But share a little bit about that ballast water project, because that was over $1 million.
Oh yeah. Yes, it was. That started out, well, and just to back you up a tiny bit, to the small projects we started out with, because all the board members just threw into the pot and then raised money amongst friends and relatives, But we had asked the parks for, small projects that they needed that we could do, like $5,000 projects, say, the first couple of years. And so we did all that. Well, then Phyllis heard from Isle Royal, heard about the Great Lakes Fishery Trust was doing grants for invasive species prevention. And we came up with this plan to do emergency response ballast water treatment to kill critters in the holds of ships large and small. And so what the heck, let's go for it. So we put in for this thing, and we got it. Now that was the first thing, Great Lakes Fishery Trust. That was a couple $100,000 there, a little more than that. And then the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative came around. This is a long time ago here. This was back in 2010. But we put in for and got, and then when I say we, I mean Phyllis Green and I stayed up like all night filling out the government forms. So we received this grant. It was about over $1 million to do an install and treatment and testing of a ballast water treatment system on a big sprayer. So oh gosh, I worked with the Naval Surface Warfare Center is who I had designed the system itself. And then we had guys from out on the West Coast. I don't recall the company now, but they came up with it was a sodium hydroxide mix that they could put into the ballast water with this system to supposedly kill all the critters in the hold and then safely release the ballast water back into Lake Superior.
So, Carol, I did want to just ask you this in terms of, as you were talking about the group and the foundation evolving, when you start talking about $1 million grants, that was really a major step for the foundation. And you know, you talk about this as one of the bigger, or at least one of the first sort of serious projects, but how else have you evolved in those 2 decades? I mean, you started to move into some more serious stuff, and how has that evolution been for the foundation as you move forward now? And maybe even what do you kind of see in the future for the foundation? But how has it evolved?
Well, it definitely opened the eyes of other organizations to the fact that we weren't fooling around. You know, we were just ready, willing, and able, even though we were a small group, because we did that project. It was a hit, and suddenly we had, credibility.
Right.
So, and at about the same time as we formed, there became a nationwide group called the National Parks Friends Alliance. Which was just a group that formed nationwide of all different friends groups. And these are like mostly big parks and well-known parks. And so we joined that. But
I just like how easily you're just like, oh, and then we joined that, and it's like maybe it's an eye of the storm kind of the thing, because you're in the midst of it, and Frida's here kind of smiling and kind of going along with it, that it's like it has really evolved into this, and Frida, I know that you have been, you got me involved in this for what that's worth to do all of this kind of stuff, but the evolution continues, doesn't it, Carol?
Yes, and from that, it raised awareness. And when, a couple times a year we would meet in a park, in one of our parks, our board, and have some meet and greets with locals, and just to get the word out about us. And folks started, we started upping our donations nicely. And we got involved with the wolf and moose initiatives. That was another big thing, and that is an ongoing thing, with Isle Royale mainly, and then also over on the north part of Minnesota. We've done several big projects, including moving, 17 wolves from Canada and Michipicoten Island, etc., to Isle Royale when they were down to two sickly wolves, and the moose were eating everything off the island, and there was like 1,600 moose and 2 wolves. So we've successfully raised the money to do that, and we've been able to act quickly when called upon for things.
That's probably one of the things that makes me so proud of this organization, because when the call comes out, winter study that has been going on for 60 plus years, and we've got issues, and where does it go? If you were to wait for the government to respond to that, it's, you're going to lose it. So it's really, it's
when we snagged those wolves off of Michipicoten Island, it was in 2019, and it was Parks Canada, I believe, and the Minnesota DNR was part of it. Michigan DNR was part of it, but it was a kind of a mess due to the weather, as you can imagine.
So cold.
And then, right, but then there was like a tiny little window of opportunity, and I get this frantic call, can we do this? I'm like, sure, let's do this. And you guarantee everybody's going to get paid, and off they went. And, we got like 17 wolves. So, and we were able to put together a whole documentary about that's on the website, along with a K through 12 curriculum for the teachers could download. There's different 4 different versions for different grades. It all came from that one thing that we helped fund, but you turn it around into something else too, where you can educate groups, or just any interested person can download these things and learn about them. So that was kind of an interesting thing.
And Carol, do you have a project that you are most proud of, or probably you can really roll up your sleeves and say, yep, this one is really what gets me up in the morning and keeps me at it? Because you have been with this organization from the get-go. So that is a lot of volunteer hours.
Yeah. And, one of the things, though, that has changed, and this, Frida, over the years, is we finally became enough of an organization that we had the funds to be able to hire an executive director, and we have a couple of part-time employees that work with him. So no longer is the board chairman the chief cook and bottle washer, if you will. But I'd have had to retire a long time ago. I suppose, Frida, the ongoing wolf moose projects, because now we're into this new study with our partnership with Minnesota DNR and the 1854 Treaty Authority, along with the Grand Portage Chippewa, and us are doing funding and doing this whole study of young moose in northern Minnesota, because they're trying to figure out why they're not surviving very well. So they've been just in the last. It's going on right now, and it's been going on for a couple of weeks. Trapping and collaring moose up there, and that's just another part of this wolf moose ongoing deal that will last much longer than I will. I'm quite sure.
When we think about the biologists that are on this project, Dr. Seth Moore, who is up there in the Grand Portage area, and understanding that the moose mortality rate under 4 years has just skyrocketed, and they don't know why. We know that moose have a temperature of somewhere between 99 to 103 degrees, and they are flying planes that have been specially outfitted, again, with our help trying to pull not only the resources together, but also the biologists. And they're flying over and they're finding these moose calves, finding also these young, and just trying to determine, is it wolf predation? We don't really think so. We're kind of wondering what the impact is on deer ticks, because deer can have this tick.
Yeah.
Right. The deer tick isn't affecting the deer as much because their brains can handle it. But on a moose, that same tick has to find its way. And I mean, I'm really digesting this, and God help me that Seth Moore's probably rolling his eyes saying, Frida, you don't describe it that way, but it then creates a neurology problem, and these moose are dying. And those guys are flying by helicopter, by plane. They're doing whatever they can to get the information because, of course, the winter is the best time that we can study the moose because we can see them.
Right. Yep. And that's going on right now. So I think to Walt's question, becoming involved, the group of us becoming involved with this whole wolf moose initiative is probably something that we could be most proud of.
It sounds like a very ambitious project, but you, as a group, the foundation said, we're going to shoot big now that we've gotten to a point. Now, somebody's listening to this right now, and they're like, well, this National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, this sounds like something I'd like to get involved with. How can someone who's listening to the podcast get involved? How can they find out a little bit more? Maybe they can, obviously, donations are always accepted, but I mean, like being able to help or getting involved on the ground, so to speak. What's a good way, Carol, to find out some more?
Yes, definitely check out our website. It's NPLSF.org, and they can learn about all of these projects that we have ongoing. There's latest news, all the different things. There's quite a bit on the website. And coming up in this year, we're going to have several volunteer initiatives that people can sign up for, and those will be listed on the website as they come to fruition here this spring. I was just speaking with our executive director, and he's pretty excited about that. So, and some of the things that, for instance, we have done as board members and interested outsiders, you can go and do things like rehabbing an old cabin that's been in disarray on the island, or we totally turned the Asabo light station, lightkeeper's house was Pictured Rocks was using it for storage, and we paid for redoing the inside and outfitting it with period furniture and everything. So now it's something that people can visit. But we had, it was like a group work bee.
Sure.
So there will be things like that. Then people can look and see what is of interest to them. And also the contact phone numbers and email addresses are on the website if somebody wants to go ahead and contact our executive director and say, hey, this sounds like something I'm really interested in.
Yeah, and you can get in there. Yeah.
Or even bringing new projects to light. Mm-hmm. I know one of our other great initiatives is to try to really make Isle Royale that we aren't dependent on diesel fuel. The idea of going to Isle Royale and, oh my gosh, I'm finally there after, maybe it's a 6-hour boat ride on the Ranger. Maybe it's a half-hour boat ride from the shores of Minnesota. Maybe it's a 3-hour boat ride on the Isle Royale Queen, but you get there finally. You've been thinking about this and you hear those diesel generators, and trying to make that so that we are not dependent. We are using alternative energies through the winter as well.
Yes.
So,
well, that is another one of our main initiative projects too, is also the decarbonizing the parks to the extent that's possible. And one of the things, and on Isle Royale in particular, and Frida and I went and looked at the project this past fall. It's about all installed right now. On the west end, the Washington Island area is a big new, hidden from view solar array to run everything over there. They've got a visitor center and a restaurant, a little shop, a bunch of stuff. And there's no more big diesel generator back in the woods, and the Park Service housing and such that's down there. So that'll be good this year.
Sounds like a very good sort of way of looking at the future, and that's what it sounds like. There's a lot with this foundation. Again, Carol Brady with us here, one of the founding board member of the foundation. Again, as we wrap up here a little bit with you, Carol, just curious again if people want to find out some more, but even before we get to the website again, there's a question here on our list that I know Frida put together, and that is, when you talk to somebody about this particular lake and you talk about how you feel it is aptly named, is there something that you find the hardest to describe to someone that's maybe never been near the shoreline? Because we have people that listen to this in places of the world that they don't have an idea like we are blessed to have. What do you say to somebody about why it's important to do this kind of work? How do you describe the big lake and the shorelines to somebody like that?
Oh, boy. Well, it changes constantly, but, most people have never been to Lake Superior. But I also think most people have been to the coast of an ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to really notice that this is not the coast of an ocean. On Lake Superior, you might be on a sand beach, you might be on a craggy rock outcrop, and the lake could be kind of calm, it can be just wild, but when the best thing is it's clear and cold, and if you got a cup with you, you dip it in there and take a drink. It's just great. It's fresh, it's fresh water. It's just amazing. That is the part I think people just don't get, because they think it's going to just look like a big lake. And then when they realize it looks like the ocean, they forget that it's clear and cold and fresh.
That is probably the best way right there to put a wrap on that, Carol. Again, the website for the foundation for people, if they can want to find out more, your website again is what?
NPLSF.org.
That's Carol Brady, who is the founding National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation board member. Frida, this has been a fascinating conversation. I mean, she has so much more to say, which is always fun about that. But I mean, you know her, you've been involved in this much longer than I have. And from my perspective, I had really no idea of the scope or the magnitude of some of the projects that the foundation has coordinated and is continuing to coordinate,
Walt, I love how you always say, from big water comes big ideas. And I hope that our listeners understand that, yes, it's been 20 years. It has evolution. There's so many things that are happening, but never, more than ever, has our national park system needed people like Carol that are out there telling the story so that we can preserve these 400 units of the National Park Service, because we can't rely on the government to do it. We need to all pitch in and do our part.
And the interesting thing also is the NPLSF.org, the website, is where you can find out all this information. That's also where you can get a hold of us, get messages to us with ideas about some future podcasts. You can also find all of our previous podcasts. So check that out. Get involved with the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. But, Carol, that was just a great chat with her. And that's pretty much, I mean, you couldn't ask for more than that with a little bit of history. So hopefully all the listeners took it in with some opportunity to learn. And
be involved.
Yes.
You bet. I mean, I remember when Carol and I were over at the Michigan Island, and the Apostles has the most amazing lighthouse. We were working on the old lighthouse and the gardening there, and we got a chance to climb up the new lighthouse, which looks down on the old lighthouse. And it was just like, wow, understanding that the history of those places. And yep, they do need you to come weed the flower beds once in a while or clean out the old fish cabins. And, that's just a way that you can give your time and energy.
Yep, get involved. Yep. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this time around on the Lake Superior podcast. I'm Walt Lindala.
I'm Frida Waara. Thanks for listening. The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, NPLSF, is the only official nonprofit 501c3 fundraising partner of the National Park Service for all 5 U.S. national park sites on Lake Superior.
To learn more about NPLSF projects and programs, you can visit the website at nplsf.org or friend them on Facebook.
I'm Frida Waara.
And I'm Walt Lindala. Thanks for listening to the Lake Superior podcast.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?
And by the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. As a nonprofit, we rely on support from listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider a donation. To learn more and make a gift, visit us at www.gosuperior.org.